Thank you, Mayor Sanders. We meet here in this beautiful city at a defining moment for our countries and their economies, and a defining moment for our industry. These are the kind of moments that have defined the history and success of ACI North America these past 20 years. It was at such a moment that we conceived and made sure Congress passed the passenger facility charge to better enable airports to take full advantage of opportunities created by the new post-deregulation paradigm, and at the same time saw enacted into law an effective national aircraft noise policy. It was at such a moment, amid much skepticism, that the airport community came together to provide crucial backing for the U.S. government's efforts to liberalize international air service. And make no mistake, those more than 100 open skies agreements owe much to the efforts of airports and ACI North America. And we provided critical support to our Canadian members when they were working to better influence their government to expand international air service. It was at such a moment that we moved quickly to enact the AMT waiver for airport bonds in 2009, which, and many people forget this, reopened the market for airport bonds, which had been frozen shut by the financial crisis. ACI North America has made its reputation by doing such big things and by shaping history. Sometimes that means, to quote William F. Buckley, and those of you who know my politics know this is a rare moment indeed, to quote William F. Buckley. To quote William F. Buckley, we stand astride history and yell, "Stop," as we did when we fought efforts to impose 100% employee screening, or more recently, efforts to rush ill-considered federal rules on safety management systems, de-icing and stormwater runoff, and financial reporting for airport board members. And sometimes we give history a good kick in the pants, as we did on the PFC, Open Skies, and AMT. This defining moment is different, though. And if we seize it, we can change history and one day look back and say, out of the wreckage caused by economic crisis and government dysfunction, we turned this time into our finest hour. One of the great untold stories in economic history is the role airports have played in generating economic growth and opportunity. Airports have led the way in creating the infrastructure to bring low-fare service to more and more regions, not just in the United States, but around the world. Airports have led the way to open new domestic and international markets to more competitive choice, often in the face of opposition from airlines and governments. As I travel and see what's being done around the globe, I'm struck and heartened by the extent to which the imperative of taking full advantage of the airport economic engine is accepted wisdom in so many parts of the world. Governments all over the world are working to create conditions for meaningful investment in infrastructure. Airlines in many parts of the world engage in this process as partners, working with airport officials because they know investment in airport infrastructure is critical to their being able to profitably perform their function in this global economic puzzle. Air transportation in such regions as Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East is growing rapidly as governments, airports, and airlines come together around a common understanding that investment in air transportation is critical to the growth of their regions and the prosperity of their people. What is happening around the world is astounding, but there's one big glaring exception right here in the United States of America. Rather than understand the need to invest in infrastructure, the U.S. government actually stands in the way of airports and local communities who want and need to better finance infrastructure. And in this, they are aided and abetted by many in the aviation industry, sometimes directly, as in the case of the airlines, and sometimes indirectly, as in the case of many other interests, including some in general aviation. Now, here's what's so amazing about this dynamic. In the past month, I've heard speeches by such people as President Obama, the leader of the Airline Association, and the leader of a major general aviation association. All decry the current state of aviation infrastructure in the United States. The airline leader calls for a national airline policy. The general aviation leader calls for a national aviation policy. President Obama and my colleagues from those associations all talk about how we are being left behind while places like China, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai expand and modernize airports. They are all right. We are falling behind. In a global industry with global supply chains and global patterns of travel, it does matter that we are being left behind. And then they say nothing more, as if we can catch up by some magic formula. Here's what's missing. In all the places those leaders talk about, what they have in common is that they rely on a modern system of passenger user fees, what we here in the United States call passenger facility charges, and what those of you in more liberal Canada, where the government's addicted to the money you pay in rent, call airport improvement fees. That whole part gets left out. Now, I'm assuming that the President of the United States and the leader of the Airline Association and the leader of the General Aviation Association are not calling for Chinese-style or Emirati-style government interference in the building of airports. And I'm assuming that these individuals understand that airports don't just build and modernize themselves, but they remain silent once the admittedly effective talking point of comparing to the U.S. to those other places is made. Let me speak plainly. The airports of this country are held back because the United States government regulates the financial lives of U.S. airports through a Nixon-era regulatory framework that predates airline deregulation and has long since lost its relevance. And we are going to lose the international race until that changes. The airlines have long fought any meaningful change to this out-of-date regime because they want airports regulated like utilities to help keep out competition and retain control. And general aviation is satisfied to benefit from facilities built with PFCs and to benefit from facilities built with the money sent back to the trust fund by the larger airports through the PFC turnback, but they are unwilling to join the chorus of voices calling for us to bring our airport financial framework into the 21st century. Earlier this year, I gave a speech at the Airport Cities Conference in Memphis, calling the U.S. government and the airlines out on this. And I've repeated that message in several forums since. And it's time to admit that others in the aviation community share in this, including general aviation, aerospace manufacturers, and others. It is unacceptable for them to go around and give speeches about how we're falling behind the rest of the world in some attempt to attract attention or government money, and then retreat when it comes time to confront the fact that we are using out-of-date Nixon-era methods, generated at a time when 8-track tapes were the newest rage, to tackle problems that require 21st century iPad-type strategies. I'm no longer willing to give them a pass, and neither should you be. It's self-evident that the ability of the U.S. government to fund airport infrastructure going forward is going to be severely limited. The deficit is out of control, and the idea of investing government dollars in infrastructure has become somewhat discredited by many who view it as backdoor spending. Fine. We need to understand there may be no hope or help from Washington. But they ought to also take a look at some of the regulations we live under, withdrawing many of those that provide little or no benefit, can save them plenty of staff time and money. So let's stop going hat in hand begging their indulgence. Let's just tell them to get out of the way and free airports to generate our own resources, in our own communities, and to build and modernize our own facilities with money that stays at the airport and is not sent to Washington. This is the way to build infrastructure. This is the way to create jobs. These are the tools that these places around the world are using to beat our brains in. Want to create jobs? Want to build 21st century infrastructure? Want to reduce the deficit and the debt? Check, check, and check. Set airports free, give us the tools in use all over the world, remove the Nixon-era job-killing shackles, and watch what we can do. It is plain as the ample nose on my face that this is the direction we need to move. But we have much more work to do to plow the ground, develop the specific policies to get us there, and most importantly, build the case and a cadre of supporters to help us get there. We will not shy from this effort, we will lead it. We have embarked on a multi-year campaign approved by the ACI North America Board. We'll be working to develop a new policy approach, since it is plain that the policies and arguments we've been using for years, good for the last 4 years, good ones for the times, are no longer adequate. We are engaging airport official representatives as we develop a new approach, and we'll be working with our colleagues at AAAE over the next year to blend these results with theirs so that the industry is speaking with a single overriding message. We have undertaken a program of research and message development to put together arguments that can gain traction in the current political environment. An environment, by the way, that can be very receptive to our message. We are not asking for a bailout or any special favors. We're simply asking for Nixon-era job-killing shackles to be removed and for local communities to be given greater say over their own future. We're undertaking a comprehensive public relations campaign and have hired one of the nation's premier firms, Fleishman Hillard, to work with us. Airports are 60 years behind the times in getting our message out. Until 1978, we were just facilities, places where people caught flights that were approved by the government and paid a fare set by the government. Now, airports are businesses, and airlines, through their rents and landing fees, pay about a quarter on average of the cost of running an airport. Before 1978, airports didn't have much of a role in attracting air service competition. Now that role is indispensable. And I think that's one of the reasons airlines like the current setup. Those Nixon-era shackles hamper the ability of airports to build and attract new service. Fleishman Hillard's done some polling for us and shows we have room to make our arguments, but also shows we have ground to make up. There are hundreds of you in this room, and I bet I've had a conversation with most of you that goes something like this. People just don't understand what airports do. We're going to change that. Finally, we're going to build, with Fleischman's help, a nationwide coalition of supporters, people who care about and need the air transportation system, but who are not normally involved in our issues. Leaders in local business, labor, civic groups, educational institutions, and others. People who can help us get our message across. People who go to Tea Party meetings, and people who contribute to MoveOn.org. We want and need them all. Our issues are not partisan. Our desire to build infrastructure and create jobs appeals across the spectrum. Our desire to do so in a way that can reduce the deficit is right for the times. The fact that airports are powerful economic engines is clear. We don't have many ideological enemies. Our main challenges are inertia on the part of the government and many aviation interests, and a theological belief on the part of airlines that airport economic freedom will somehow harm them. I happen to believe it will have the opposite effect, by the way. And I want to assure everyone in this room that the idea is not to start a war with the airlines, though fight back against their misleading and misguided arguments we must and we are. As many of you are doing, I am reaching out to the airlines because I truly believe that they will benefit from a financial regime that works best to facilitate the movement of passengers and goods to destinations and markets as it has in much of the rest of the world. The problem is that we all in this room understand these things. We know we're right, rational, and logical. We're passionate about these things and can't understand why anyone would disagree. It's not that people disagree so much as that they don't understand, and we must change that. That is why it is so important to develop a clear new policy goal. That is why we are doing the important research so that our facts and messages are in order. That is why it is absolutely critical to begin now the public relations campaign to get the message out so that your local airport is a major driver of your local economy. That is why it is so critical to develop a nationwide network of supporters beyond the airport community to help us get this message across, and to do it across the political spectrum and in every corner of the country. The basic fact is this: while governments, airports, and airlines around the world are making prudent, forward-looking decisions, we in the United States are looking backward. We are mired in a mindset that forgets the lessons of 5 millennia of human history, a lesson that teaches that those who invest and develop their transportation infrastructure will prosper and grow, and those who do not will fall behind. If we do not change, we are destined to watch the rest of the world leave us in the dust, while they develop the global transportation links critical to growth in the 21st century. This is a defining moment. The reality we have lived with for decades is broken and not fixable. American politics have changed. Our messages are out of date. Those we seek to persuade in the press, in the public, and among the political decision makers have been bombarded for decades by messages from others who do not adequately understand the modern airport and what it contributes to economic growth. We have never been in this game, and it's time to suit up. If we do not do these things, we will bounce from FAA reauthorization extension to extension and perhaps shutdown to shutdown. We will see government grants dwindle while government regulation increases. We will see the value of the PFC erode, and we can even see our access to tax-exempt financing hampered. It is not a pretty picture. And efforts to rearrange the furniture will be inadequate. Yes, there will always be a role for government. After all, access to the global aviation system is critical for communities of all sizes, and there is a role for government in ensuring that. But we need to come to grips with the fact that a Nixon-era, job-killing financial regime is strangling aviation infrastructure. We need to scrap it and build a new system that will enable us to compete in the 21st century economy. ACI North America is committed totally to this effort. We are all in, as they say, but we need the involvement of all of you. Change is difficult, and I know many people want things to stay the same, only maybe a little better. That option is no longer available. Things will be different, for sure. The only question is, who shapes the outcome? If we ask for the same things in the same way, we could be facing a very difficult outcome indeed. There are no guarantees, but if we suit up and get out there and develop the policies and the facts and the message and spread it to every corner of this country and the political spectrum and recruit thousands of new people to help us do it, we have a great chance to build a 21st century job-creating financial regime that allows us to compete globally, permits our communities and our airlines to grow and thrive, and that fulfills the ultimate purpose of air transportation, the safe and efficient movement of people and products to destinations and markets wherever they may be. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to welcome ACI North America's Board Chairman, Frank Miller, Aviation Director of the City of San Antonio Aviation Department. As Chair, Frank has been a great leader for the airport industry, providing strategic guidance and unwavering support to ACI North America's initiatives and to the staff during the past year. It's now my privilege to turn the podium over to ACI North America's 2011 Chair, Frank Miller.